Ladies and gentlemen, would you kindly rise for our national anthem? Please be seated. Mr. Premier, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, today history is being made. We are breaking the ground for our Cultural Arts Center and new physical education wing. This will be a tribute to those who have made it happen. Today has a special significance for me because of a similar historic event in 1935. The occasion was the opening of the first YMHA-owned building on Brunswick Avenue. The Brunswick building cost $17,000, which, even at that time, was a small sum of money for a recreational building. The young people intensely appreciated this building because it was achieved through sweat and toil. We in our household felt the thrill of the opening of the Brunswick building in a special way because my father was, at that time, the president of the fledgling YMHA, and the achievements and crises of the Y were of concern to the whole family. History has recorded my father's generation had harnessed the human and material resources to build that Brunswick building. History also bears witness that in 1953, the members of our community rallied to build the Bloor building so that the growing Jewish population could enjoy a modern Y. Again, the record will show that our community responded to the needs of the northern residents and erected in 1961 the existing northern branch. Now we are completing this branch, doubling its size and broadening its program dimensions in physical education and in cultural pursuits. All of these events have one underlying motivation. Our tradition has placed a heavy emphasis on the family, for it has been the foundation stone of our people. And no matter what political or social storms were raging around us, we found stability within our family structure. I want to assure you, Mr. Premier, that the political storms I refer to took place in Europe many years ago, and my remarks do not cast any reflection upon the enlightened government which you had. But the survival of the Jewish family, like its counterpart in other sectors of society, is threatened by overwhelming forces. Unless the family is bolstered by the community, our fragile social fabric will be torn apart beyond repair. Our very survival is at stake. Our special interest is naturally in the fields of recreation and culture. There, we have already witnessed major changes. Life has dictated that the family is no longer able to provide sufficient recreational activities. These programs must come from outside the family, from community agencies like the YMHA. Simply stated, our role is to strengthen the family, both as a unit and as individuals, through cultural and recreational activities. That is what it's all about. One of our sages summed it up for us. He said, and I quote, "As my father planted for me, so do I plant for my children." All of you assembled here today are amongst those who have planted the seeds whose fruit will be enjoyed by our children and their children. Your reward is the satisfaction that you have made this happen. There is no greater reward. As I formally open the groundbreaking ceremony, may I call upon Rabbi Arthur Bielfeld, spiritual leader of Temple Emmanuel, to deliver the invocation.
Would you all rise, please? Eloheinu v'Elohe Avotenu, our God, and God of our fathers. We have gathered together to consider our blessings and to thank you for all your goodness to us. Especially are we grateful for the gift of giving, for the privilege of sharing what we have with others, for the discovery that the more we give of ourselves, the more there is of ourselves to give away. We do not know why we live in health and prosperity, while thousands of our brothers labor in bondage of mind and of body. Nor can we fathom why we have survived to see this day, while countless hundreds of thousands have perished seeking in their innocence simply to live a decent life. We know only that we are responsible for each other, and that in our acceptance of that responsibility lies our strength and the measure of our worth. May the foundations we are about to establish remind us of these thoughts. May they recall the wisdom of our sage Maimonides, who knew that the welfare of the soul is established only when the well-being of the body is secured. Let this be a place of life and rejoicing, of light and contentment, of health and of peace. Amen.
Rabbi Bielfeld, thank you for a deeply inspirational message. We are honored today to have with us many distinguished government dignitaries, communal leaders, and YMHA workers. The number is so large that it is impossible to properly recognize all of them. To aid you in identifying them, please refer to your sheet included with your program. I do, however, wish to recognize the Honorable Alan Grossman, Provincial Secretary for Resources Development, the Honorable Dennis Trimble, Minister of Energy, His Worship Mel Lastman, Mayor of the Borough of North York, Mr. Malcolm Rowan, Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Culture and Recreation. Mr. Rowan is representing the Honorable Robert Welch, who regrettably is unable to be with us because of a prior commitment. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honor is not a stranger to any of us. We see his image in our newspapers. He comes into our homes on TV, and we hear his voice on radio. For many of us, this is our only contact. But I was more fortunate. I met our Premier personally. My mission was to invite provincial support for our cultural wing. I can tell you without any hesitation that all the previous images I had of Mr. Davis were indeed pale carbon copies of the person I met at Queen's Park. In a relaxed, informal manner, he asked to be briefed on the scope of our project, its community support, and its program objectives. As I mounted fact upon fact, I could see that Mr. Davis was absorbing every detail with an intensity that comes only from a deep commitment to the well-being of a community. By the nature of his penetrating remarks, I could see that Mr. Davis had absorbed the multitude of data contained in the documents prepared for him by his able staff. It did not take us long to realize that on the strength of our achievements and of our future plans, Mr. Davis was prepared to support the YMHA completion program. He stipulated that the government's interest was primarily in the cultural arts, because this was a new frontier for his government. Little did we know at that time that the province would announce the contribution of $1,100,000 to the Cultural Arts Centre as the first project of the new Ministry of Culture and Recreation. In our tradition, the firstborn of a family has a coveted place in the household. Being the first project of the newly formed ministry is a challenge to develop a cultural center which will be a mark of distinction to the Premier and his government. We are indeed very proud that Mr. Davis has honored us by his presence at this groundbreaking ceremony for the cultural and physical education wings. We are doubly pleased because Mrs. Davis is also with us. We extend to you, Mrs. Davis, our thanks for gracing this event with your presence. May I ask Marvell Koffler to present Mrs. Davis with a token of our appreciation. Mrs. Davis, Marvell, kindly step forward. Come on up. It is now my happy duty to introduce our guest of honor, the Honorable William Davis, Premier of Ontario.
Mr. Chairman, Rabbi Bielfeld, my colleagues in government, Mr. Grossman and Mr. Timbrow, Your Excellency the Council, Mr. Mayor, the Lord Mayor of North York, listen, Mr. Singer, I was introduced the other day as the Right Honorable William Davis. I mean, everybody gets a promotion now and then. Other guests on the platform, and ladies and gentlemen, I must confess when Kathy and I came into the tent this afternoon that I was somewhat taken aback. I see that all our hosts are wearing green helmets. Whether they know something about the climatic conditions that we don't, that they have prepared themselves in case the winds do reach yesterday's level. I also notice at the front that 5 people who are to turn the sod this afternoon have also been given this added protection. Kathy, I'll share mine with you. The ladies were worried about their hairdos when they came across here this afternoon. Also delighted to see in the audience, without her button this time, one of the municipal councilors, Mrs. Shiner. I also, Wilford, have to tell you that Kathy and I have company from our own home community today in the person of one of our municipal councilors. She is here not representing the city of Brampton, although I'm sure she's delighted to do so, but also as chairman of the building committee of the local Y. Now, Diane, I have to tell you something. There is no grant for the building program at the Brampton Y. I just didn't want it clearly understood by the press that the Premier's home riding doesn't get particular treatment. I mean, it only gets the best that I can provide. But Dan, it's delightful to see you here. I hope you look carefully at the plans. Recognize that this is serving a larger population than ours, and so the amounts are somewhat higher than those you are presently raising. Now, if there are any of you who have an interest in Brampton and would like to help Mrs. Souter in her building campaign, she'll meet you at the door as you go out. Has pledge cards and everything available. And I have done my best. It's a pleasure to share this platform today with Mr. Grossman and his wife. Mr. Grossman is one of those very quiet, shy, unassuming political people, as those of you who know him well would totally understand. And, well, the government, of course, has become involved in this project. I must tell you, and I'm sure it comes as no surprise, that Alan was one of those who supported this with very great enthusiasm. However, yes, you can applaud because he deserves it. In fact, if Alan didn't have a bad back today, I'd suggest he stand up and take a bow. But, no, Alan, you don't. He doesn't need much prompting, does he? Now, Dennis, I can't think of any reason why I can ask you to stand up and take a bow, Mr. Timbrow, the Minister of Energy, except you'll notice that they have been very conservative in the amount of energy that is being used here today in terms of, actually it's quite warm, Wilfred. You told me to be chilly in the tent this afternoon. I think really, though, Dennis, part of it is the heat being generated by the enthusiastic gathering that is here. Whether that is a conservation measure of any kind, I'm not recommending it. I can see it now in tomorrow's paper. Davis says if you crowd the household, you can turn down the thermostats even further. Yeah, well, if any of you are scribbling notes, please don't put that down. I mean, I'll deny that I said it, even though I did. I have an address here to give today, but I'm enjoying myself so much I may not quite get around to it, but I guess I'd better. I haven't copies for the press. I apologize. I have a very bad habit of never sticking to my remarks. And so if you have to work here this afternoon, well, that's part of the job. You have to earn your keep from time to time. Wilfred, I was delighted with your introduction. In fact, I was sitting back listening to it, and I said to myself, you better come on other platforms in the months that lie ahead with me. In fact, there's some new writings being created. I have one or two thoughts I could discuss with you later. However, in my traditional nonpartisan sense, I would never refer to things of that kind here this afternoon, would I, Alan? Not too much. I will now get around to my remarks, I think. Are you in charge of publicity back there at the table? I see 2 or 3. You can tell the press they can start to write now. The moment has come. You know, even premiers have to have a bit of fun. This is sort of Kathy and my day off, and we're having really a very pleasant time here this afternoon, so I hope you will excuse some of my general observations. Well, I hope not too much. You know, I listened to your chairman, and he's very modest too. He didn't tell you something else about his visit to my office. He was there with David and others, and they made a very persuasive case. They did it with modesty, but also with very real conviction. And I listened to his remarks this afternoon, and really he said some of the things that I shall try to say, not nearly as well, of course. I'm not left speechless, though, by your remarks, but I would like to amplify briefly on some of the thoughts, Wilfred, that you have expressed, because they are of concern to me, as I'm sure they are to you, and I believe to the people of this whole community and of the province. Some of you may recall that when the Ministry of Culture and Recreation came into being earlier this year, there was a certain amount of cynicism expressed in some quarters, and the question was raised by some, why do you need a new ministry when services that deal with various aspects of culture and recreation are already available in our existing ministries? Well, I'm going to try and tell you why here this afternoon, as clearly and for your benefit as concisely as I can. The fundamental reason for bringing all these existing services under one roof, as it were, was to give a renewed emphasis to the important part played by culture and recreation in our society, and to focus public attention upon the need for these civilizing ingredients in times that are becoming increasingly uncivilized. I think you only need a cursory knowledge of history to realize that a society which fails to foster its culture, or on some occasion forgets its culture, soon becomes a society without meaning or direction. Self-interest, and self-interest in the most selfish definition of the term, as a result, becomes predominant. Most of us have seen it happen before in our lifetime, and unfortunately, I think we're seeing evidence of it happening again today. We know what it can lead to, but I suggest to you that government in this day and age, in a democratic society, has the moral responsibility to avert the seemingly inevitable, as well as the benefit of past experience upon which to draw in providing the right leadership at the right time. That is why we've got to re-emphasize all that is good in our heritage at a time when the temptation is great to yield to all that is bad. I can recall, Alan, some of the observations that have been made recently because the government has decided to appoint a royal commission to investigate the relationship between violence in our society and the communications media. Well, I make no apologies for it, because I personally believe there is a relationship, and while it may not be the responsibility in a legal sense for the provincial government of this province to see what can be done, I believe it is important for government to provide the moral leadership so that the public at least will see that some focus is being generated and some opportunity to improve it takes place. You see, I speak of it very personally because Wilfred, Kathy, and I are trying to raise a family. And believe it or not, premiers have as many problems as you people have. In fact, some days we think even more. 5 of them. It's a very conservative family in size. And you know, I don't say for a moment that our number 2 son, who is still at home, the eldest, has gone on to post-secondary education at a certain university well west of Toronto. You know, I told him, Alan, he should go to the U of T because I went there, and of course, as a result, he decided to go somewhere else. But, you know, I don't say Ian is going to wander out after watching some of the stuff he sees on television and commit a violent crime. I'm not suggesting that. But what I do sense happening in our society today is a building of a tolerance to some of this thing happening. And not just here in our own community, in our own province, and in our country, but quite frankly in an international sense as well. I'm departing from my notes, but I ask the question today, where is morality in international affairs in 1975? I give you a little statistic. The average child sees something like 18,000 people killed on television or in the movies before they reach high school. Now, somebody told to me if they went to see Custer's Last Stand, they'd see 3,000 or 4,000 at once. Well, that may be, but that's not what I'm referring to. And I think government has obligations in this field because, Wilfred, believe it or not, some of us feel very strongly about family and what is happening as well. I've talked briefly of culture. I want also to talk of recreation. And in my view, the two are far from being mutually exclusive. In fact, quite to the contrary. Most cultural pursuits, one way or the other, they're a form of recreation. For the same reasons, many recreational pursuits could be described as being cultural in nature. Other recreational activities, while somewhat removed from the normal definition of culture, nonetheless tell us something about where our interests lie as a society and as individuals. In the field of amateur athletics, they bring forth the best in determination, self-discipline, and the quest for excellence. In some instances, the same can be said for those engaged in team sports, even on the professional level, and Vernon, 75 is the year of the Argos, believe it or not. You have to be an optimist, both as a politician and as an Argonaut supporter. But the point I'm trying to make, ladies and gentlemen, is that culture and recreation, in the broadest sense, are capable of bringing to the fore the more positive aspects we as human beings possess collectively and on our own. And in view of the challenges that face us in our society here in our province today, we need them as never before. I think it's fair to state that in times of economic uncertainty, in times of international tensions, I think that more than anything else, we all, if we were honest about it, we yearn for a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and a sense of being at peace with our neighbors. And if we're going to fulfill that yearning, we must first realize that there are not just one community. We aren't. We're many. There are ethnic communities, religious communities, cultural communities, municipal communities, to name but a few. All of them constitute individual strands in the fabric of our society, but they're not always necessarily compatible. There can be, unfortunately, social tensions arising out of ignorance and inherited prejudice. Again, I think that government has the moral responsibility to provide some channel of communication between our communities, not just by building a bridge, but by offering a window through which one community can look and understand the other and appreciate the differences in values. And the Ministry of Culture and Recreation, through selective programs and initiatives, will provide that window to understanding in a positive and, I hope, an illuminating way. Among other things, this will involve a partnership between government and such community organizations as you people are so enthusiastically supporting here this afternoon. And this is why, very simply, this need to have community interest, the need to have various sections of our community understand one another. Wilfred, this was one of the basic reasons why the government was pleased to support the completion program. As one can imagine, a lot of people, most of them well-intentioned, come to my office, and it turns out that many of them, well, they want the moon. Obviously, I'm not in a position to grant anybody the moon, let alone pay for the journey. But when I hear that a group such as yours has collected most of the fare, if one can phrase it that way, through hard work and unrelenting dedication, I'm very receptive to helping them go that extra mile to reach their and your objective. And this is particularly so with the Y and your community efforts, because your organization has long been a model in providing recreational and educational services for people of all ages in this community. In fact, Wilfred, you won't believe this, when I was somewhat younger and a few pounds lighter, I used to work out at the Y on Bloor Street as a student. I was going to say scholar, but I'm sticking to the truth here today. I mean, I see one or two people in the audience with whom I attended class, and they would know better. But I've been there. I know what it has done. And above all, as our chairman has pointed out to you today in a very, I think, fine way, you have always appreciated the importance of the family. Something some don't today. I'm old-fashioned. I believe in it. And I think it is the key element in any civilized society. As I said earlier, as the father of five, I have no difficulty whatsoever in relating to the interests of this group here today. And I share with you your concerns about the pressures being brought to bear on family life, which is as a result of a society that, in my view, has become far too permissive in tolerating behavior and attitudes that belong to another and less enlightened age. It has often been said by political leaders, and it is a fact, that you can't legislate morality. But I can assure you that as a government we intend, through various educational programs and practical constraints, to curb the tide we feel is there. I don't want to appear less than objective, but compared to other environments today, life in our province is still good, it is still decent, it is still civilized, and we intend to keep it that way. The work being done by organizations such as yours has been and will continue to be of invaluable assistance to us and to others in meeting this challenge. And that's why, very simply, Wilfred, that I am honored, as is Kathy. We're honored and delighted to be a participant with you in these proceedings here this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Mr. Premier, your remarks today are indeed an inspiration, not only to us at this event, but to the whole province. Every local community has received both a mandate and a challenge to enrich its way of life through the enhancement of cultural and recreational services. Mr. Premier, may I invite you to join with us in the symbolic turning of the sod. Assisting us will be Murray Koffler, an outstanding communal leader and benefactor of the YMHA, Harold Green, chairman of the building committee, Samuel J. Granitstein and Alex Fisher, chairman and co-chairman, respectively, of the campaign to erect the first phase of this building. May I ask the sod turners to come forth. As you are descending from the dais, you will receive the traditional hard hat and shovel. And since we know that you're all going to be sidewalk superintendents, you may keep your hats for entry to the job and the shovels to help us dig the foundations.
Gentlemen, if you will just remain with me for one further moment. I am delighted at the opportunity at this time to tangibly recognize the efforts of the gentlemen who have just turned the sod for the new wing to the Y. I am delighted also at the fact that each one of these people are doing so in a different capacity, each in his own way. And in that way we build community. Mr. Premier, I have a plaque here that I wish to present to you, and may I read its inscription. The Honourable William Davis, Premier of Ontario, in honour of your participation in the turning of the sod for the Toronto YMYWHA Physical Education Wing and the Cultural Arts Centre, April 20th, 1975. I hope that you will place this item amongst your memorabilia, and when you come across it, you will remind yourself of this very, very important afternoon in the Jewish community, particularly with respect to the YMYWHA. Well, I have my reading glasses on. I can't see too far. Murray Koffler. Harold Green. Sam Granitstein. Alec Fisher. I have one further item here. Bert Fine, would you please come forward? Bert, you are really the good luck charm for the YMYWHA. During your presidency, this idea was just an idea until you got hold of it. When you did get hold of it, the seed of a great opportunity was planted, and we are here today to thank you that during your presidency and subsequently as chairman of the board, you produced what you have here this afternoon, all of these people working with you in conjunction with a great opportunity. Thank you very much.
The completion of the YMHA of Toronto is an event which is being hailed by many Jewish communities in the world. Some have written congratulatory letters to us, but one communication is indeed unique. The message from Israel is in the form of a stone, a Jerusalem stone to be inserted in the new building. A 700-pound stone cannot be dropped into a Jerusalem mailbox for delivery to the YMHA in Toronto. We had to find other means of transportation. El Al's district manager, Yaakov Margolin, and Amnon Gilad, the Canadian director of the Israel Government Tourist Office, made the arrangements to quarry the block and airship it. I would like them to complete the delivery of the stone to the YMHA. We've had a request for you to lift it up and show everybody. To honor the arrival of this piece of the city of Jerusalem, I would like to call upon Cantor Weingart to sing for us in Hebrew 2 verses of the famous psalm which begins with the moving sentence, "If I forget thee, O Jerusalem." Assisting the cantor will be Ben Steinberg, who brought the musical score from Israel. The composer is Yitzhak Heilman, a young Israeli living in Haifa.
אשכחך ירושלים, תשכח ימיני. אם אשכחך ירושלים, תשכח ימיני. תדבק לשוני להקיא המלוך Yerushalayim al ras simchati. Meshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini Meshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini Meshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini
Cantor Weingart, Ben Steinberg, your musical contribution to our ceremony is most appreciated. We are all pleased that the Consul General of the State of Israel in Toronto will be presenting, on behalf of his country, the block of Jerusalem stone for inclusion in our building. Mr. Shmuel Avnot is an accomplished diplomat and has been very well received by all sectors of the community. However, he has made one very important diplomatic error, and I don't mind sharing it with you. He beats most of our tennis players in Toronto. The action is unforgivable, Shmuel, and could be the cause of international upheavals. But considering that this is a festive occasion, we'll forgive and forget the humiliation. It is now my happy duty to call upon Shmuel Avnot, the Consul General of Israel in Toronto.
Chairman, the Honorable Mr. Davis, Madame Davis, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if those remarks about my tennis calling for my recall back home, but I want you to know that I'm doing already penance. And just recently, just 2 days ago, I lost in tennis. To this couple, the Fishers. It is with great pleasure that I come here today to bring greetings on behalf of the State of Israel. And I do not come empty-handed. I bring with me a stone from Jerusalem, a gift that will serve as a cornerstone for the new wing of the Y, which brings such great enjoyment and healthy recreation to many people of so many diversified sections of this community. The Jerusalem stone was flown here to the good offices of El Al and the Israel Government Tourist Office, who conceived the idea and made it possible. But this stone is also symbolic of the kinship between the people of Israel and the great country of Canada. We have sports centers in Israel donated and dedicated by great Canadian philanthropists, such as the John Bassett Sports Center in Kibbutz Yotvata. We have also great scientific institutions which were developed to the generosity of Canadians such as the Kaufler family, who donated the Kaufler Accelerator Tower in the Weizmann Institute of Science. Together, this combination of the development of brawn and brain by Canadians in Israel is the ideal which the Y is fostering by its activities within this community. And now, we can make a small, perhaps very small reciprocal gestures from Israel to bring a piece of Israel to metropolitan Toronto to become part of the foundation of the new wing of such fine institution. But the kinship between the people of Israel and the people of Canada goes much deeper. It is a kinship for similar ideals, for the same respect for democratic ideals, for the same regard for a healthy mind in a healthy body. There are many organizations and many groups whose proclaimed aim are the promotion of peace. But it's through institutions such as the Y that these ideas are practiced in concrete ways to further the unity of all groups in the community while still respecting their right to their own individuality and ethnic character. It is through this kind of activity that the Y makes its great contribution to a better understanding and a hope for peace in this troubled world of ours. I would like to extend the good wishes of my government and my own humble felicitations for even greater successful operation of the Y with its new expanded facilities, with the hope that the Y, its doors may always be open to carry on its very worthwhile aims with the same enthusiastic spirit which has made it the great institution it is. Thank you very much.
Somebody said in jest, why don't you pick it up? If you look around you and see some of these fellows with the green hats, they're a member of our North Y fitness group, and I'm sure that many of them, especially Tarzan standing over there, could easily lift it up. Mr. Premier, Mr. Consul General, ladies and gentlemen, ever since the destruction of the Second Temple some 1900 years ago, observant Jews chose to remember this catastrophic event by maintaining an unfinished section in the easterly wall of their houses. This rough or unpainted spot was known as the reminder of the destruction of Jerusalem. Today we have a reversal role. A piece of Jerusalem is being sent to us by Israel for our new construction, to celebrate rather than to mourn. This stone comes to us as a fitting symbol of the rebirth of the Jewish state. We will place this block of stone in a coveted position for everyone to see and to feel the kinship expressed in this symbol. We will always remember that the very soil from which this block has been quarried, our Hebrew prophets delivered their call for a better world. It is now our duty, yours and mine, to make our new institution a true rock of ages. Thank you.
Time does not permit us to call on the distinguished heads of organizations to present greetings. We are, however, making one exception. The Toronto YMHA is part of a world movement of YMHAs and Jewish community centers. The nerve center of this activity is the National Jewish Welfare Board, with world headquarters in New York City and Jerusalem. Interestingly, the National Jewish Welfare Board had a significant part in the present completion program. During the preliminary agency self-study, the consultant was Emanuel Berlatsky, who is with us today. We welcome him and wish him well on his recent retirement. Representing the National Jewish Welfare Board is Mr. Joseph Kruger, a vice president. Mr. Kruger, where are you? Oh, yeah. We appreciate your honoring us today by your presence. It will be our pleasure to receive your message of greetings from the YMHA World Movement.
When my alarm awakened me this morning in the quiet of my home in South Orange, New Jersey, I moved with alacrity because I knew I was coming to an event of special significance. But I must say that as I spoke with the leaders of the Toronto Y before coming here to the tent and listening to the program here, I cannot help but feel a special tinge of excitement about the importance of what is transpiring here today, not only to the Jewish community and the general community of Toronto, but to the Y movement throughout the world. I am here today to represent, as you heard from Wilfred, the family of Ys throughout North America, as well as the growing number of Ys in Israel and in other parts of the world. And I bring special greetings here to the Toronto YMHA, to this august assemblage, and to the Toronto community, from Daniel Rose, President of our JWB, from Herbert Millman, our Executive Vice President, and from Morton Mandel, who is President of the World Federation. And you just heard from Wilfred that I'm here today as part of a team of Manny Balatsky and myself to represent JWB. For Manny has worked with this community for many years as JWB's consultant, and I used to marvel as I would see him at the New York office with valise in hand, ready to commute to Toronto as he did so frequently. And it was Manny who served as JWB's consultant in designing and augmenting the study process which began back in 1968, and which we see reaching a certain fruition here today. I'd like to say that JWB, Mr. Premier, has a special department, the JWB Lecture Bureau, constantly on the search for new people to speak out and send a message across the country. And I'd like to suggest to the Lecture Bureau, if I may, that perhaps they have a new candidate to add to their rather long list. The special lay and professional leadership that exists in the Y movement is eloquent evidence here in Toronto, where imaginative vision and strong leadership were shared by David Andrews, your executive director, and a succession of remarkable lay leaders. And it wasn't so far back in the long ago when our JWB meetings in the States were graced by the presence of Sam Grattenstein and Max Schwartz. And today we are delighted to have your president, Wilfred Poslins, as a participant on our JWB board, even during these times when he has given such outstanding leadership to this community's activities, and especially the sensitive leadership he has given to this, the coming edition of the Physical Education Wing and Cultural Arts Center. The study process began in 1968 under the leadership of Bert Fine, who you heard a moment ago. And it was Bert, as you heard, who moved it into strong momentum right from the start, and who has continued to play an important role with this project through the years. And then another stalwart was John Wall, who you just heard, who carried the project forward during his tenure as president of the Y. I'm not sure you realize here that the Toronto YMHA has long been recognized as an important flagship in our North American constellation of YMHAs. It was among the first to add a second major facility, which it did back in 1961 right at this location, to serve more fully and more effectively the total Jewish community as well as the general community. Its cultural arts have long been an effective part of this community's experience, and it has set an example to YMHAs everywhere. Now, this groundbreaking ceremony today is noteworthy, for it gives expression to the importance of the cultural arts in aiding individuals to have a more fulfilling life experience. And it is fortunate, too, that the cultural arts here has the active endorsement and encouragement of the province of Ontario. Now, just a word about the World Federation of YMHAs. There's been a tremendous growth throughout the world. In Israel itself, there are today more than 50 community centers, and within another 5 years, the hope is to have 100 community centers. All this development triggered by the tremendous success of the Jerusalem YM and YWHA, which was built by monies raised both in the States and here in Canada. Now, next Sunday, at the close of the JWB board meeting, board members will leave for a 12-day visit to Israel, where we will meet with our counterparts there to share experiences and to learn together. We will be joined by delegations from Great Britain, France, and Belgium for meetings to determine the future role of the World Federation. And I will have the opportunity, perhaps the first from this event today, to tell the folks in Israel firsthand about the wonderful ceremonies today, the wonderful program, and also how well you received this tremendous, wonderful gift from Israel. Now, Jewish communities in all parts of the world have been giving expression to their deep concern for the future of their Jewish communities. Now, community centers in these lands are being developed, and it is hopeful that through the Jewish Community Center, these communities will find their own native solutions to their communal problems. Now, this great event today marks the start of construction of this fine new planned facility. I must tell you that it really will reverberate beyond the confines of Toronto and of Ontario, that what is happening here is already being talked about throughout the States and abroad, and that success in the kind of endeavor that has been on its way here since 1968, and within 18 to 20 months, I hear, will be completed for service, is the kind of thing given through the channels of the National Jewish Welfare Board to inspire other communities to find their way out of their problems through this kind of program. Thank you very much.
Before concluding the groundbreaking ceremonies, I must express, on behalf of the YMHA and the community at large, our deepest appreciation to the many people who have made this occasion a reality. You are no doubt aware that a planning process, a campaign, and a construction program are all team efforts. Time prevents me from listing the whole team. However, I would like to express special appreciation to Mrs. Marvell Koffler for her efforts in the planning of the Cultural Arts Program, to Harold Green and Jerry Granick for their leadership in the construction program. And to my entire fundraising group, and I'll clap for them. The community is indeed proud of these ladies and gentlemen who have given so much to our venture. Finally, I wish to acknowledge on your behalf the leadership and follow-up provided by David Andrews, our Executive Director, and his staff. I hereby close this groundbreaking ceremony and relegate it to the annals of history so that people will know that we have done for our children and our children's children. Thank you for joining with us. May I invite you to meet our guest of honor and partake of some refreshments.